What if the man you've loved in secret is the one secret that could tear your family apart? Hector stared at the question scrawled in his own handwriting on the back of a crumpled receipt, the words blurring as the highway lights of Interstate 70 streaked past the car windows. He was 32, an English teacher at Lincoln High in suburban Denver, the kind of guy parents trusted with their kids' futures and colleagues invited to weekend barbecues. On paper, his life looked steady, safe. But safety had become another word for silence. For 3 years, Paul had been his everything, the graphic designer with the easy laugh and the way of making even grocery runs feel like adventures. They had met at a quiet book festival downtown, bonding over a shared love of old paperbacks and the way the world seemed gentler when they were together. Yet Hector had never once brought Paul home to the 2-story brick house on Maple Lane where his parents still lived, the same house where he'd hidden magazines under his mattress as a teenager and lied about weekend sleepovers. Tonight, with the trunk packed for a long Thanksgiving weekend, the lie felt heavier than ever. "You sure about this?" Paul asked from the driver's seat, one hand resting lightly on Hector's knee. His voice was calm, but Hector caught the flicker of worry in his blue eyes. Paul had always been the steady one, the one who never pushed but never let Hector hide forever either. "I mean, if it's too soon, we can turn around. Grab takeout in Vail and pretend we're just 2 guys on a road trip." Hector shook his head, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No, it's time. Mom keeps asking why I never bring anyone special around. Dad's been dropping hints about grandkids again. I can't keep being the perfect son who somehow forgot to fall in love with a woman." The words tasted bitter, like the coffee they'd grabbed at the last rest stop. He remembered the family dinners of his childhood, the way his father, a retired Marine, would clap him on the back and say, "Real men provide, son. Real men build families." Those words had echoed in Hector's head the first time he kissed Paul under the glow of string lights at a rooftop party. They echoed still. As the car climbed toward the foothills, Hector's mind drifted to the high school hallway where he taught Shakespeare and coached the debate team. Last spring, when a sophomore came out in his class and faced whispers in the locker room, Hector had stepped in quietly, offering after-school talks and a listening ear. The kid had thanked him months later, saying Hector made him feel seen. But Hector never told anyone that he understood that fear better than most, that every time he graded papers late into the night, he was really avoiding the text from his sister asking about his love life. Paul squeezed his knee gently. "Hey, whatever happens, we've got each other. That's not changing." Hector nodded, but inside, the question burned brighter. What if loving Paul openly meant losing the family that had shaped him? The exit for Maple Lane appeared too soon, the familiar streetlights flickering like old memories. Hector's heart hammered as Paul turned the wheel, the house coming into view with its porch light glowing like a warning beacon. This weekend would either mend the cracks or widen them into chasms. He just didn't know which yet. The front door opened before they even killed the engine. His mother, Elena, stepped out in her favorite blue cardigan, arms already open in that way that always made Hector feel 10 years old again. "There you are? I was starting to worry the snow would hit early." Her hug was warm, genuine, but Hector felt the distance in it, the years of unspoken truths sitting between them like ungraded essays. Behind her, his father, Frank, stood tall and straight-backed, silver hair cropped short, eyes scanning the 2 men with the same assessing look he once gave new recruits. "Good to see you, son." "Who's this?" Hector swallowed, the moment he'd rehearsed 1,000 times in the shower suddenly feeling impossible. "This is Paul. My boyfriend." The word hung in the cold November air, fragile as the first snowflake drifting down. Elena's smile froze for half a second, then widened a fraction too quickly. Frank's jaw tightened, but he extended a hand. "Well, come on in. Dinner's almost ready." As they stepped inside, the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon rolls wrapping around them like a too-tight blanket, Hector wondered if he'd just lit the fuse on everything he'd built. Paul glanced at him sideways, a silent promise in his eyes, and for the first time that night, Hector allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, love could be the answer instead of the secret that destroyed them all. The living room felt smaller than Hector remembered, the same faded floral couch where he'd watched football games with his dad, now holding the weight of 3 years of concealed texts and stolen weekends. Paul set their bags by the stairs with the easy grace that had first drawn Hector to him, while Elena bustled in the kitchen, her chatter filling the silence like a shield. I made your favorite stuffing, Hector, extra sage, just like you like. And Paul, dear, do you have any allergies? I can whip up something else if needed. Her voice was bright, almost too bright, the way it got when she was covering discomfort. Hector caught the glance she exchanged with Frank, quick and loaded, the kind that spoke volumes without words. Frank settled into his recliner, remote in hand, flipping channels as if nothing had changed. So, Paul, what do you do for work? The question was polite on the surface, but Hector heard the undercurrent, the same tone his father used when sizing up new neighbors or potential dates for his sister years ago. Paul answered smoothly, describing his freelance graphic design gigs, the startup logo he'd just finished, the way he loved turning ideas into visuals. Sounds creative, Frank grunted, eyes on the TV. Hector's always been the book type. Never figured he'd pair up with an artist. Hector's sister, Maria, arrived with her husband and 2 kids just as they sat down to eat, the chaos of coats and laughter momentarily easing the tension. Her 8-year-old son bolted straight for Hector, demanding a story like always, while her daughter clung to Paul's leg, fascinated by his blonde hair. Maria hugged Hector tightly, whispering, "You finally brought someone home. About time, big brother." But when her eyes met Paul's, Hector saw the flicker of realization, the way her smile tightened at the corners. Dinner passed in fragments of conversation, safe topics like school budgets and the upcoming holiday parade. Paul fit in effortlessly, complimenting Elena's pie, asking Frank about his Marine days, even helping Maria's son with a math puzzle at the table. Yet Hector felt every pause, every careful avoidance of pronouns or future plans. Later, in the guest room upstairs that had once been his childhood bedroom, Paul pulled him close on the edge of the twin bed. "They're trying. That's something." Hector buried his face in Paul's shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of cedar cologne. "Dad barely looked at me after I said the word. Mom's acting like it's a phase we'll all laugh about later." The old posters on the wall stared back, remnants of a boy who dreamed of being normal, whatever that meant. Downstairs, voices carried faintly through the vents, Maria and their parents talking in low tones. Hector crept to the landing, heart pounding, catching fragments. "He's always been different," Frank was saying. "But this? In my house." Elena's reply was softer, pleading. "Frank, times have changed. He's happy. Look at them." Maria's voice cut in, sharper. "I saw the way he looks at Paul. It's real. But what about the school? Parents find out their teacher's gay, and suddenly he's the topic at every PTA meeting." Hector backed away, the floor creaking under his feet like an accusation. Paul found him there, pulling him back to the room without a word. That night, as snow tapped against the window, Hector lay awake listening to Paul's steady breathing, replaying every family milestone he'd attended alone, every holiday photo, missing the man beside him now. The secret had protected them once, but now it was cracking, letting in light that might blind them all before it warmed anything. Morning light filtered through the lace curtains, turning the breakfast table into a battlefield of unspoken words. Hector poured coffee for everyone, his hands steadier than he felt, while Paul helped Elena clear plates from the night before. Frank sat at the head, newspaper open but unread, his silence louder than any lecture. When Maria's kids ran outside to build a snowman, the adults finally circled the wagons. "So," Frank began, folding the paper with deliberate care, "how long has this been going on?" Hector met his father's gaze, the marine stare that once made him straighten his spine, now making his stomach twist. 3 years, Dad. Paul's not some experiment. He's the reason I smile in the mornings." Elena reached across the table, her fingers brushing Hector's. "We just want you safe, Mijo. The world isn't always kind to people like you." The phrase landed like a stone in still water, rippling through the room. Paul spoke up then, voice even. "I get it, Mrs. Rivera. My own family took time. But Hector's worth every risk." Maria leaned forward, eyes flashing. "Risk? Hector, you're a teacher. One rumor, and parents pull their kids. Remember what happened to Mr. Ellis 2 towns over? They ran him out. The misunderstanding hit then, sharp as broken glass." Maria pulled out her phone, showing a group chat from old high school friends where someone had already speculated about Hector's new roommate. I didn't say anything, she insisted, but the damage was done. Frank's face darkened. My son, the one I raised to stand tall, hiding this from us like some shame. Hector felt the room tilt. Years of careful distance, the late-night drives to Paul's apartment to avoid questions, the way he dodged family vacations, all crashing down. He stood abruptly, chair scraping. Shame? The only shame is pretending I'm someone I'm not. He stormed out to the backyard, snow crunching under his boots, the cold biting through his sweater. Paul followed moments later, wrapping an arm around him without asking. They're scared, not hateful. Give them a minute. But inside, Hector's mind raced through every worst-case scenario. Job loss, family holidays without him, the look in his students' eyes if whispers spread. Back inside, Elena found him later in the garage, sorting old tools to keep busy. Your father had a cousin once, she said quietly, handing him a thermos of hot chocolate. Never talked about it. Died alone because no one understood. The revelation hung between them, a bridge half-built. Yet when Frank appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable, Hector braced for the final blow. The weekend was unraveling faster than he'd feared, and the question from the receipt burned hotter. What if this love was the secret that finally tore them apart for good? The afternoon stretched long and tense, the snow falling heavier now, blanketing the yard like a fresh start no one was ready for. Paul suggested a walk to clear heads, and surprisingly, Maria joined them, her kids trailing behind with sleds. Away from the house, the air felt lighter. I didn't mean to stir things up, Maria admitted, kicking at a snowdrift. It's just, I remember how Dad was after Uncle Luis left. Said the family name was ruined. I didn't want that for you. Hector stopped, turning to face her. Uncle Luis? The one who moved to California and never came back. Maria nodded, eyes downcast. He was gay too. Dad found out, and, well, you know how he gets. The pieces clicked, old family stories suddenly reframed. Paul listened quietly, then shared his own coming-out story, the years of therapy, the mother who eventually marched in pride parades. By the time they returned, cheeks red from cold and conversation, something had shifted. Elena had set out sandwiches, and even Frank joined at the table, listening as Paul described the community center he volunteered at, helping queer youth find safe spaces. Sounds like good work, Frank muttered, the first crack in his armor. But the misunderstanding wasn't over. That evening, while Hector helped with dishes, his phone buzzed with a text from a colleague at school. Heard rumors you're bringing someone home. Parents are asking questions. Watch your back. The betrayal stung, not from family but from the world outside, the one that paid his salary and shaped his days. He showed Paul the message in their room, voice cracking. Maybe I should just go back to the way things were. Keep us quiet. Protect everything. Paul stepped back, hurt flashing across his face for the first time. If that's what you need, I'll pack tonight. But Hector, running back into the closet, isn't protecting us. It's erasing me. The sacrifice loomed, heavy as the snow outside. Hector reached for him, pulling Paul into a fierce hug, whispering apologies into his shoulder. Downstairs, voices rose again, Frank and Elena arguing in the kitchen. Hector listened from the stairs, heart in his throat, until Elena's words cut through. He's our son, Frank. The same boy who mowed lawns to buy you that fishing rod. Love doesn't come with conditions. The turning point felt close, fragile, like the first thaw of spring. Hector returned to the living room, Paul beside him, ready to face whatever came next. The secret had cost them enough. Now it was time to see if truth could rebuild what fear had nearly broken. Night settled over the house, the fire in the hearth crackling like old arguments refusing to die. Frank sat alone in his recliner, staring into the flames, when Hector approached, Paul waiting tactfully upstairs. Dad, can we talk? The words felt like stepping off a cliff. Frank didn't look up at first, but his shoulders sagged. I served 20 years so you kids wouldn't have to fight battles. Figured life would be straight lines for you. Hector sat across from him, the same chair he'd occupied as a boy confessing bad grades. Life isn't lines, Dad. It's circles, loops, the people who pull you back when you stray. He told the full story then, not just the facts but the nights he'd cried alone after first dates, The pride parades he'd watched from afar, the way Paul's patience had taught him courage. Frank listened, really listened, his marine mask slipping to reveal the man beneath. "Your Uncle Luis," he wrote once, years later. Said he never stopped loving the family. I never wrote back. Regret that now. The family secret spilled out fully, the cousin who'd lived quietly and died quietly. The letters Elena had kept hidden in a shoebox. Maria joined them. Then Elena. The circle completing as stories layered over stories, misunderstandings unraveling thread by thread. Paul came down eventually, invited into the warmth, sharing laughter over old photo albums where Hector's awkward teen years stared back. The crisis peaked when Hector voiced his deepest fear. What if the school finds out and I lose the kids I teach? The ones who need someone like me. Frank's reply surprised everyone. Then you fight like I taught you. Stand tall. I'll be there if you need backup. No grand speeches, just quiet acceptance building like the snowdrifts outside. By midnight, the living room held a different energy, exhaustion mixed with relief. Hector felt the internal storm quieting, the identity he'd wrestled for years finally settling into place. Paul caught his eye across the room, a small nod passing between them, the kind that said everything words couldn't. The weekend had tested every bond, friendship with Maria deepening through shared vulnerability, family ties straining then strengthening. Society's shadow lingered, the teacher's world waiting with its judgments. But here, in this house, the choice had been made. Love wasn't the secret anymore. It was the foundation. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear, sunlight piercing the snow-covered yard like forgiveness. The table groaned under Elena's feast, laughter flowing easier now, Maria's kids chattering about the snowman they'd named after Paul. Hector carved the turkey, Paul's hand brushing his in a small, private gesture that no one flinched at. Frank raised his glass first. To family. All of it. The toast landed soft, but it carried weight, the hug starting small then growing. Elena pulled Hector close, whispering, "I'm proud of the man you've become." Maria tackled them both in a group embrace, tears mixing with smiles. Even Frank wrapped an arm around Paul, clapping his back once, twice, the gesture awkward but real. "You make my son happy. That's enough for me." The whole family clustered together by the tree, arms linked, the kind of hug that mended years of distance in seconds. Hector felt the last walls crumble, the crisis of self resolved not in grand revelation, but in quiet choice. Paul stood at the center of it all, steady as ever, the boyfriend who'd become family without demanding it. As they packed the car later, snow melting under tires, Hector glanced back at the house. The secret that once threatened to destroy them had instead revealed its strength. Society still waited outside, school whispers and societal stares ready to challenge, but the foundation held. Friends from his teaching circle would hear the stories soon, some supportive, some distant, but Hector was done hiding. The drive home stretched ahead, Paul at the wheel again, their hands intertwined openly now. The journey wasn't over, but the first step, the bravest one, had been taken. In the rearview mirror, the family waved from the porch, Maria's kids jumping, Frank's posture a little less rigid. Hector smiled, truly smiled. The question from that crumpled receipt finally answered. The man he'd loved in secret had become the reason they were all whole again. After everything unfolded that Thanksgiving, I realized family isn't defined by perfection, but by the willingness to choose understanding over fear. Hector's story shows that coming out isn't just about revealing a truth. It's about trusting love to bridge gaps wider than we imagine. The real lesson here is simple yet profound. When we stop hiding the parts of ourselves that matter most, we give everyone around us the chance to grow too. My advice, if I may offer one without preaching, is to speak your truth gently but firmly, and leave room for others to catch up at their own pace. Sometimes the tightest hugs come after the hardest conversations.